The sun was just beginning to set over the quiet suburban town, casting a golden glow over the streets. Inside the local police station, a sense of calm had settled. Officers were sipping coffee, wrapping up paperwork, and preparing to clock out for the day. The occasional sound of laughter and chatter punctuated the otherwise uneventful evening. For Officer Rachel Carter, a seasoned law enforcement professional known for her sharp instincts and compassionate demeanor, it felt like just another routine shift. That was until the door burst open. The sudden noise startled everyone. Rachel looked up from her desk, her hand instinctively moving toward her holstered weapon. The sight that greeted her, however, was unlike anything she'd ever encountered. A large, scruffy German shepherd dashed into the station, its coat matted with dirt, and its chest heaving from exertion. In its mouth, it carried something that immediately caught Rachel's attention. "What the?" Officer Mark Daniels, her younger and somewhat jittery partner, froze mid-sentence as the dog trotted into the center of the room. It stopped, its intelligent eyes scanning the room with a sense of urgency. Rachel stood slowly, her years of training kicking in. "Easy, boy," she said, her voice calm but firm. The dog's ears perked up at her tone, and it looked directly at her as if it understood her words. It gently set down the object it had been carrying and sat back on its haunches, its gaze fixed on Rachel. Her breath caught in her throat. The object was a baby, a tiny, fragile infant wrapped in a tattered, dirt-streaked blanket. The baby's face was serene, its chest rising and falling with the soft rhythm of sleep. For a moment, the room was eerily silent, the weight of the scene sinking in. "Rachel!" Mark's voice trembled as he stepped closer, his wide eyes shifting between the dog and the baby. "What the hell is going on?" Rachel didn't answer. She knelt beside the infant, her hands moving gently to check its pulse and breathing. "It's alive," she murmured, relief washing over her. "Call an ambulance now!" Mark snapped into action, fumbling with his phone as he dialed emergency services. Meanwhile, Rachel carefully cradled the baby in her arms, her mind racing with questions. Where had this baby come from? And why had this dog brought it here? The German shepherd let out a low whine, its tail wagging slightly as it watched Rachel. It stepped forward, nudging her arm gently with its nose before turning toward the door. It barked once, sharp and commanding, as if trying to convey something urgent. "You're trying to tell us something, aren't you?" Rachel said, her voice soft but laced with curiosity. She reached out to stroke the dog's head, and it leaned into her touch briefly before pulling away and barking again. This time, it scratched at the door. The sound of approaching sirens broke the moment. Paramedics arrived quickly, their movements efficient as they assessed the baby's condition. "We'll take it from here," one of them said to Rachel, gently taking the infant from her arms. "We need to get this little one to the hospital for a full examination." Rachel nodded but couldn't shake the feeling that the mystery was far from over. The dog had already moved to the doorway, its body tense and its eyes fixed on her. "Rachel, what are you doing?" Mark asked nervously as she grabbed her jacket and moved toward the door. "We're following that dog," she said firmly. Mark hesitated, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Are you serious? What if it's dangerous?" "Dangerous? That dog just brought us a baby," Rachel shot back. "It knows something, and I'm not about to ignore it." The German shepherd barked again, as if to emphasize her point, and bolted out the door. Rachel didn't wait for Mark's approval. She followed the dog, her heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and curiosity. Mark sighed heavily but ran after her. The dog led them through the dimly lit streets of the town, its pace steady but determined. Rachel and Mark kept up as best as they could, exchanging bewildered glances as the journey took them farther from the station. Eventually, the trail led to the outskirts of town, where the comforting glow of streetlights gave way to the shadowy expanse of the woods. Rachel stopped at the tree line, her flashlight casting long, dancing shadows across the forest floor. The dog paused briefly, turning to look at her with an expression that almost seemed to plead for trust. Then it plunged into the woods, barking urgently. "Rachel, are you sure about this?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with unease. "No," she admitted, stepping into the woods after the dog. But I have a feeling we don't have a choice. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. The dog moved with purpose, its barking now intermittent as it guided them deeper into the trees. Rachel's grip tightened on her flashlight, her senses on high alert. Then, faintly, she heard it, a cry. It was distant but unmistakable, a sound that sent a chill down her spine. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, stopping in her tracks. Mark nodded, his face pale. "Yeah. What do we do?" Rachel didn't answer. She simply looked at the dog, which had stopped and was now staring at her with unwavering determination. It barked once more before sprinting toward the sound. Rachel took a deep breath and followed, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they were about to uncover something far bigger than they had anticipated. The forest felt alive around them, shadows dancing in the dim light of their flashlights. Officer Rachel Carter moved cautiously, her breath visible in the cool night air. Behind her, Officer Mark Daniels kept pace, muttering under his breath about the absurdity of chasing a dog into the woods. The German shepherd led them deeper into the dense trees, its barks sporadic but purposeful. It stopped occasionally to glance back, as if ensuring they were still following. Rachel couldn't help but feel that the dog knew exactly where it was going, and why. "I'm telling you, this is insane," Mark hissed, his flashlight sweeping over the underbrush. "We don't even know what we're looking for." Rachel didn't respond. Her focus was fixed on the dog, which had paused ahead of them. It stood still, ears perked, listening intently. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, it bolted toward a clearing up ahead. "Wait!" Rachel called, quickening her pace. Mark groaned but followed, his reluctance evident in his every step. The clearing was small, bathed in pale moonlight. In the center was an old, rusted pickup truck, its windows shattered and its tires sunk into the muddy ground. The vehicle looked like it had been abandoned for years, but something about the scene felt off. The dog ran to the truck, barking furiously. It circled the vehicle before stopping at the driver's side door, pawing at it and whining. "What is it, boy?" Rachel asked, approaching cautiously. The dog's urgency was contagious, and her heart raced as she reached for the door handle. It creaked loudly as she pulled it open, revealing a scene that made her stomach churn. Inside the truck was a tangle of blankets, empty food wrappers, and blood. A dark, dried stain covered the passenger seat, stark against the faded upholstery. Rachel's instincts screamed danger, and she stepped back, drawing her flashlight closer to inspect the scene. "What the hell happened here?" Mark asked, his voice shaky. He peered over her shoulder, his expression turning grim as he took in the sight. The dog barked again, pulling their attention to the ground near the truck. It was digging furiously, dirt flying as it clawed at the earth. Rachel's pulse quickened. She knelt down and shone her flashlight on the spot the dog had uncovered. A glint of metal caught her eye. "Help me," she said to Mark, who reluctantly joined her. Together, they cleared the soil, revealing a small, locked box. The dog stepped back, its tail wagging slightly as if satisfied with their discovery. Rachel lifted the box, its weight surprising her. It was old, the metal rusted and the lock sturdy. She glanced at Mark. "We need to open this." Mark sighed. "Do we even want to know what's inside?" Rachel ignored him and carried the box back to the truck, setting it on the hood. She pulled out her multi-tool and began working on the lock. The dog sat nearby, watching intently. After a few tense minutes, the lock gave way with a satisfying click. Rachel hesitated for a moment, then lifted the lid. Inside were several items: a bundle of documents, a small leather-bound notebook, and a photograph. She picked up the photo first, her breath catching in her throat as she studied it. It was a picture of a woman holding a baby. The woman's face was bruised, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. The baby was swaddled in a blanket, the same tattered blanket the German shepherd had carried into the police station. "Rachel, look at this," Mark said, pulling one of the documents from the box. It was a missing persons report, dated several months ago. The name on the report matched the one scrawled on the back of the photograph, Emily Harper. She's the mother, Rachel said softly, her mind racing. And this baby, it's hers. Mark's face darkened. If she's missing, then where is she now? Rachel didn't answer. Her attention was drawn to the notebook. She opened it carefully, revealing page after page of handwritten entries. The writing was frantic, the words detailing a desperate escape from an abusive partner. The final entry was chilling. He's going to kill me. If you find this, please protect my baby. Rachel closed the notebook, her jaw tightening. She looked at the dog, which was now lying at her feet, its eyes filled with an almost human sadness. She trusted you, didn't she? Rachel whispered. The dog's ears perked up, and it let out a soft whine. Mark shifted uncomfortably. What do we do now? Rachel stood, determination hardening her features. We find her. Alive or dead, we owe it to her and this baby to uncover the truth. The dog barked once, a sound that felt like agreement. Rachel placed the box in the back seat of the truck and motioned for Mark to follow her. Where are we going? He asked, exasperation creeping into his voice. Wherever this dog takes us, Rachel replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. She opened the door of her patrol car, and the dog jumped in without hesitation. Mark sighed heavily but climbed into the passenger seat. As they drove back toward town, the German Shepherd sat in the back, its eyes fixed on the road ahead. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the dog knew more than it could ever express. And she was determined to follow its lead, no matter where it took them. The patrol car's tires crunched against the gravel road, headlights slicing through the darkness. Officer Rachel Carter gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing with possibilities. Beside her, Officer Mark Daniels sat quietly, the unease in his posture matching her own. In the back seat, the German Shepherd shifted restlessly, its sharp eyes fixed on the road ahead. This dog better know what it's doing, Mark muttered, breaking the silence. Rachel shot him a look. It's already led us this far. Have a little faith. The GPS showed they were moving away from the suburbs and into a more isolated area. Trees loomed on either side of the road, their branches clawing at the night sky. Rachel's gut told her they were heading towards something significant, something that could explain the abandoned truck, the bloodstains, and the desperate notes in the journal. The dog suddenly barked, startling both officers. It stood, pressing its nose against the window. Rachel slowed the car, peering into the dense woods. There, partially obscured by overgrown foliage, was an old dirt path barely visible in the beam of the headlights. That's new, Mark said, his voice tight. I didn't see it on the map. Neither did I, Rachel replied, pulling the car to a stop. She turned to the dog, which had started whining, its tail wagging anxiously. This is where you want us to go, isn't it? The dog barked again, confirming her suspicion. Rachel grabbed her flashlight and opened the door. Let's check it out. Mark groaned but followed her lead, grabbing a flashlight of his own. The dog bounded ahead, its movements deliberate and purposeful. Rachel and Mark exchanged a glance before following, the beam of their flashlights cutting through the dense underbrush. The path wound deeper into the forest, the air growing colder with every step. Rachel's boots crunched against fallen leaves, her senses on high alert. The dog paused occasionally, sniffing the ground, then continued with a renewed sense of urgency. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. In the center stood an old, decrepit cabin, its wooden walls weathered and covered in moss. The windows were dark, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking in the wind. This place gives me the creeps, Mark whispered, his flashlight sweeping over the structure. What are we even looking for? Rachel didn't answer. Her focus was on the dog, which had stopped in front of the cabin. It sat down, staring at the door, its ears perked. Rachel tightened her grip on her flashlight and stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached, the faint sound of crying reached her ears. She froze, motioning for Mark to stay quiet. The sound was coming from inside the cabin, a soft, muffled sob that sent chills down her spine. Do you hear that? She whispered. Mark nodded, his expression grim. Yeah. Someone's in there. Rachel pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Her flashlight illuminated the interior, revealing a single room filled with the remnants of a life once lived. A broken table lay on its side, and tattered curtains hung limply over the windows. In the corner, a figure huddled against the wall. Police! Rachel called out, stepping inside cautiously. We're here to help. Are you hurt? The figure flinched, curling into a tighter ball. Rachel moved closer, her flashlight revealing the face of a young woman. Her clothes were dirty and torn, her face pale and streaked with tears. Clutched in her arms was a bundle of blankets. It's okay, Rachel said gently, lowering her flashlight. You're safe now. The woman looked up, her eyes wide with fear. He's coming back, she whispered hoarsely. He'll find us. He always does. Rachel exchanged a glance with Mark, who had stepped inside and was scanning the room for any immediate threats. Who's coming back? Rachel asked, kneeling beside the woman. My husband, the woman replied, her voice trembling. He's dangerous. He's the one who. She broke into sobs, clutching the bundle tighter. Rachel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll protect you. But we need to know everything. Is this your baby? The woman nodded, her grip on the bundle loosening slightly to reveal a tiny face. The baby was asleep, its chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Rachel felt a surge of relief but knew they weren't out of danger yet. Mark, radio for backup, she said, standing up. We need to get them out of here. Mark nodded and stepped outside to make the call. Rachel stayed with the woman, who was now rocking the baby gently, her sobs subsiding into quiet whimpers. The dog lay at her feet, its eyes fixed on the door, as if anticipating something. Minutes later, Mark returned, his face pale. We've got a problem, he said, his voice low. The radio's not working. No signal out here. Rachel's stomach sank. We'll have to move them ourselves. Help me get her to the car. Before they could act, a loud crash echoed through the forest. The woman screamed, clutching the baby tightly. The dog sprang to its feet, growling low and deep. Rachel drew her weapon, her eyes darting to the door. Stay behind me, she ordered, positioning herself between the woman and the door. Mark did the same, his flashlight sweeping over the room. The sound of footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. Rachel's heart pounded as she aimed her weapon at the entrance. The dog barked furiously, its hackles raised. Whoever's out there, this is the police, Rachel called out. Identify yourself. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, a deep, menacing voice called back. You've got something that belongs to me. Rachel tightened her grip on her weapon, her mind racing. Whoever this was, they weren't leaving without a fight. And she was determined to make sure they didn't get what they came for. The dog growled again, standing its ground beside her. Rachel steeled herself, ready for whatever came next. The fight for survival had just begun. The forest was eerily still, the tension palpable as Rachel and Mark braced for what was to come. The dog, a steadfast sentinel, growled low in its throat, ears pinned back and ready to lunge. Rachel steadied her breath, her eyes fixed on the cabin door. Outside, the crunch of deliberate footsteps grew louder, each step echoing like a warning bell. Stay close to the woman and the baby, Rachel whispered to Mark, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her own heartbeat. He nodded, positioning himself protectively near the corner where the young mother sat trembling. The door creaked open slowly, and a shadow loomed in the doorway. Rachel's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a tall man with a scruffy beard and wild eyes. His clothes were stained and torn, and his right hand gripped a large hunting knife. The sight of him sent a jolt of adrenaline through Rachel's veins. Drop the knife, she commanded, her voice firm and unwavering. This is your only warning. The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound that chilled the air. You don't know who you're dealing with, he said, stepping inside. That's my wife. That's my child. And you have no right to interfere. Rachel tightened her grip on her firearm. Sir, step back and drop the weapon. We can resolve this peacefully. The man's eyes darted to the woman, who clutched the baby tightly. Maria, he said, his tone shifting to something almost pleading. Come on, baby. You know you can't run from me. You know you can't hide. Maria shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Stay away from us, Daniel! Please, just leave us alone. Daniel's expression hardened, his voice turning icy. You're coming with me. Both of you. He took another step forward. The dog sprang into action, barking ferociously and lunging toward Daniel. The sudden movement startled him, and he stumbled back, slashing the air with his knife. Rachel seized the moment. Mark, get them out of here! She shouted, advancing with her weapon raised. Mark didn't hesitate, helping Maria to her feet and guiding her toward the back of the cabin. The dog kept its focus on Daniel, a growl rumbling deep in its chest. Daniel recovered quickly, his eyes narrowing as he sized up Rachel. You think you can stop me? He sneered. You have no idea what I've been through to find them. And you have no idea what I'll do to protect them. Rachel shot back. This is your last chance. Drop the knife and step outside, or I will use force. Daniel lunged forward, the knife gleaming in the flashlight beam. Rachel fired a warning shot into the floorboards, the deafening crack of the gunshot stopping him in his tracks. He froze, his chest heaving as his eyes flickered with rage. Behind her, Mark's voice called out. They're clear! Rachel didn't lower her weapon. It's over, Daniel. Surrender now. For a moment, it seemed like he might comply. His shoulders sagged, and his grip on the knife loosened. But then his expression twisted into a snarl, and he charged at her with a guttural yell. Rachel acted on instinct, her training taking over. She fired twice, the shots echoing through the cabin. Daniel crumpled to the ground, the knife clattering from his hand. Rachel kept her weapon trained on him, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The dog approached cautiously, sniffing Daniel's motionless form. When it was clear he wasn't getting up, the dog returned to Rachel's side, its tail wagging faintly as if sensing the danger had passed. Mark re-entered the cabin, his face pale but resolute. Backup's on the way, he said. How's it looking in here? Rachel lowered her weapon, her hands trembling slightly. It's over, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. They're safe. Mark nodded, relief washing over his features. Together, they stepped outside to find Maria and the baby waiting near the patrol car. Maria's tearful gratitude was evident as she clutched her child, whispering words of thanks. The night air was still, the forest silent once more. As the sound of approaching sirens broke the quiet, Rachel felt a profound sense of resolve. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Maria and her baby, a chance to finally break free from the darkness that had overshadowed their lives. The dog sat beside Rachel, its eyes fixed on her with an almost human understanding. She reached down, scratching its head. Good work, partner, she murmured. As the first rays of dawn pierced the horizon, Rachel knew this was a night she'd never forget, a testament to courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between human and animal. The rising sun painted the forest in hues of gold and amber, casting long shadows across the ground. Rachel leaned against the patrol car, her eyes scanning the scene as paramedics tended to Maria and her baby. The baby let out a soft coo, as if sensing the newfound safety, and Maria clutched the child tightly, her tears a mix of relief and exhaustion. The dog sat nearby, its loyal gaze following Rachel's every move. It was no longer growling or tense, but its alert posture suggested it wasn't quite ready to let its guard down. You've earned yourself a medal, buddy, Rachel said, crouching to meet the dog's eyes. It wagged its tail faintly, the gesture filled with quiet pride. Mark approached, handing Rachel a steaming cup of coffee. Thought you could use this, he said, his voice laced with gratitude and fatigue. Thanks, Rachel replied, taking a sip. The warmth spread through her, grounding her after the harrowing events of the night. The flashing lights of an ambulance and additional police vehicles painted the area in streaks of red and blue. A detective stepped out, his notepad in hand and a curious expression on his face. "Detective Harris." The man introduced himself, nodding toward Rachel and Mark. "Heard you two had quite a night. Care to fill me in?" Rachel recounted the series of events, her voice steady despite the lingering tension in her muscles. She detailed how the dog had led them to Maria and the baby, how Daniel had arrived with violent intent, and how they had no choice but to neutralize the threat. Harris listened intently, his pen scribbling furiously. "And the dog?" he asked, glancing at the German shepherd. Rachel smiled faintly. "The hero of the night. We wouldn't have found them in time without him." The detective nodded, jotting down the detail. "We'll need to figure out where he came from. Might belong to someone." "I doubt it," Rachel said, glancing at the dog. "Feels like he belongs right here." Maria approached hesitantly, holding her baby close. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You saved us. You gave us a second chance." Rachel placed a reassuring hand on Maria's shoulder. "You're safe now. That's what matters. We'll make sure you and your baby get the support you need." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. "He would have killed us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You didn't just save me, you saved my son's future." The weight of her words settled over Rachel like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about a single night. It was about rewriting a story that could have ended in tragedy. The dog barked softly, drawing their attention. It stood, tail wagging, and looked at Rachel expectantly. "I think he's saying it's time to go," Mark said with a small chuckle. Rachel knelt beside the dog, scratching behind its ears. "Wherever you came from," she said softly, "you were meant to be here tonight." The paramedics began packing up, and Maria was escorted into an ambulance for a thorough checkup. The officers on the scene started clearing the area, their faces reflecting a mix of respect and awe at the bravery displayed by the officers and the dog. As Rachel and Mark prepared to leave, the dog trotted to the patrol car and hopped into the back seat, settling in as if it had always been part of their team. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Looks like we've got a new partner." Rachel laughed, the sound a welcome release after the intensity of the night. "I guess we do. Let's call him Chance, because that's what he gave Maria and her baby." Mark nodded, smiling. "Chance it is." As the patrol car pulled away, the forest returned to its serene stillness, the chaos of the night replaced by the gentle whispers of the wind. For Rachel, Mark, and Chance, this was more than the end of a case. It was the start of something extraordinary. The road ahead was long, but with a team like this, Rachel felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had forged an unbreakable bond, one that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The forest gave way to the first light of day, painting the skies in hues of orange and pink. As Rachel, Mark, and their new partner Chance returned to the station, the air in the patrol car was a mix of exhaustion and quiet triumph. The adrenaline from the night's events still coursed through their veins, but a sense of peace had begun to settle over them. Inside the station, the atmosphere shifted from the usual routine to an electric buzz. Officers gathered around, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect as they listened to Rachel and Mark recount the story of the night's events. Chance sat beside Rachel, his intelligent eyes scanning the room, his tail wagging occasionally as if he understood the attention he was receiving. Detective Harris entered, carrying a file folder. He cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "First off, I want to commend Officers Carter and Jensen for their quick thinking and bravery. And of course, we can't forget our newest team member, Chance." He gave the dog a nod, eliciting a chuckle from the crowd. "We've gathered some preliminary information on Daniel," Harris continued, his tone growing somber. "He'd been under investigation for illegal activities, including human trafficking. It's likely Maria and her baby were caught in his web, but thanks to all of you, they're safe now." A murmur spread through the room. Rachel felt a swell of pride mixed with a lingering unease. The night's events had brought justice, but it was a stark reminder of the darkness they faced every day. Maria and her baby were temporarily placed in protective custody, and the department arranged for social services to assist them in rebuilding their lives. Rachel visited Maria before she was relocated, bringing Chance along. The reunion was emotional. Maria hugged Rachel tightly, tears streaming down her face as she expressed her gratitude once more. "You're stronger than you know," Rachel said gently. "And you're not alone in this." Maria smiled through her tears. "I'll never forget what you've done for us. You gave us hope." As they left Maria's temporary home, Chance paused to look back, his gaze lingering on the small house. Rachel reached down to pat his head. "You're a hero, Chance. Don't ever forget that." The following weeks brought a new rhythm to the station. Chance became an honorary member of the team, his presence bringing a unique blend of comfort and vigilance. Officers joked that he had a better sense for danger than any of their equipment. Rachel took it upon herself to train Chance further, refining his natural instincts into valuable skills for their work. One evening, as Rachel and Chance walked through the station's quiet halls, she stopped to look at the bulletin board filled with commendations and case files. Among them was a photo of Maria and her baby, smiling brightly. It was a stark contrast to the fear that had once clouded their faces. "We did good, didn't we?" Rachel said softly, glancing at Chance. The dog wagged his tail, his eyes filled with the same unwavering loyalty that had guided him through the darkest of nights. The bond between Rachel, Mark, and Chance grew stronger with each passing day. They faced challenges together, their trust in one another unshakable. Chance's presence became a symbol of hope, not just for the department but for the community they served. As the sun set on another day, casting its golden light over the station, Rachel sat on the steps outside, Chance by her side. The journey that had begun with a mysterious arrival now felt like the start of something extraordinary. Together, they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, bound by the shadows they had conquered and the light they now shared. Enjoyed this story? If you want to read more thrilling tales and heartwarming adventures, make sure to like, share, and follow. Have thoughts or feedback? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.